Good afternoon, friends. Welcome to this third session of Decode. You see, architect Sabu Francis and me started this interactive session on architectural design and the domain of computers and the domain of the digital world in our life as architects, teachers, students, and practicing architects. So in the first session of Decode, we had the topic computing and design thinking, which happened on the 5th of September, Teachers' Day. The second session happened on 5th of October, World Architecture Day, on the topic Collate, Clarify, Design Knowledge. In both these sessions, we had wonderful participation. And there was quite a few queries which were raised in those sessions. And today's session is on collaboratively designing and how to go about this. Architect Sabu Francis will enlighten us. But before we start, Sabu would like to clarify some of the questions which are raised by participants in the earlier sessions. So over to you, Sabu, for this new invigorating session on collaboratively design.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everyone. I'm grateful that this webinar is available and all of you are present here. Actually, we should thank Harimohan. He's slightly under the weather, but still he's here to encourage us and get us going. What I am going to inform today is on one specific thing on how do we collaborate as designers. But before that, there are some questions which came up, and I think it had come up last time also. A few questions had come up, so I thought I'll just address those. So Bobby asked this question about
reforms.
Yeah, about curves. So all you have to do in TAD is to change an edge to a curve. There is a command which just changes it to a curve. So you can make any curve you want. 3-4 types of curves are there: Bezier curve, 3-point curve, semicircle, arc. All that is there. So you can use that. So that's one thing which it's quite easy to do that. There is one person here, I don't know whether she has joined, who was asking a question about how come whether prestigious colleges is important or not. So I think she's not yet an architect. She's in junior college and wants to be an architect. Anyway, so for her, the answer is that it is the students who make up the college, right? So if you want, you can sit and make the college where you join to be good. Like, and if you work with your classmates, that's how you build up the reputation of a college. A college actually is not existing, cannot exist without the students over there. So you don't have to get worried about prestige and all that. That is something which comes as byproduct. Many valuable things in life comes as byproducts. They're not the main products. So you have to work on something else to get the prestige. Then there's another question which is bothering somebody, that I'm doing architecture as it's my passion, but I feel like architecture does not have scope in India. Jobs are underpaid and work pressure is enormous. And especially for young architects, please throw some light on this topic. So one of the reasons why these CoDe webinars are being held is to clarify this particular point, because many architects are under the impression that we have to only do design and that's it. That's the only thing which we can do. For some reason, some colleges don't really spend time clarifying this. So that creates a unnecessary confusion, because what happens is that the students are coming out with a feeling that the only thing they can do is architectural design, and they will either work for somebody or start a practice, and somebody will come and give a architectural project, and then you do the project and you make your money and make your fame and all that. But that's not necessarily the way to look at architecture. You have to widen your scope and start looking at a lot more things which happens. So one of the things which hopefully will emerge here when I'm talking about this particular topic of collaborating amongst architects probably would be this issue of how you can actually widen your scope of your work and how you can go about doing your work. Okay, so that's it for now. If there are more questions, what you can do is, I think you can send a message on this chat. So I'll just say hi here. So if anybody wants, uh, you can chat on that chat box over there, and then we can talk with each other and get. Okay, so welcome once again. Let me start. I have actually not really prepared a PowerPoint presentation as such, but I am going to share the screen, and I have a whiteboard which I'll use here, and I can give you the link to that whiteboard in case somebody wants to see that on their own computer. I think it may work. Uh, it may be able to. You may be able to see that whiteboard. But right now I'm not going to use it because I'm going to introduce a few points, and then I will come and start using that whiteboard. Okay, so let me start with this particular event which happened. This is a page from Wikipedia. This happened in 1998. This happened inside Microsoft. Okay, okay, let me give you the agenda for this talk. By the end of this talk, you should get a fair amount of idea about how professionals collaborate on designing. And I'll use software designing as an example. And I'm pretty convinced that the points which is emerging in software designing at a very large level uh, uh, is applicable even for architects and designers. So I'm just building up the case here. So in 1998, there was this big embarrassment which happened, which is nowadays called the Halloween documents episode, which happened in Microsoft. So what happened is that Microsoft, inside their office, they started circulating a set of documents, where in the document they had listed out how to attack the Linux operating system. Now, for those of you who do not know what the Linux operating system is, just like how we have Microsoft Windows, you have another type of operating system called Linux, which you can use on all your computers. And Linux is actually a lot more powerful, and it is virus free. It can never take virus, because from the way that particular operating system was designed, it was designed from the ground up not to have any leakage points or anything like that. So Microsoft people started getting very worried about it. Officials inside Microsoft, they started circulating certain memos saying that, let us attack Linux because it's free and it is making inroads into the business of Microsoft. And they actually spelled out how to lie, how to spell out some untruths. They wanted to attack the community, and they said that whenever you people are participating in some public discussion somewhere, please write these points in your own words so that it doesn't look as if it's coming from Microsoft. Unfortunately, someone from there went and leaked out the documents which was privately being circulated and officially being circulated. Finally, Microsoft was in such a bad shape that they had to, publicly apologize and say, I'm sorry about this and all that. We are sorry about this and all. So that time there was this guy by the name of Eric Raymond who who criticized all this very deeply, and he went and wrote this particular book, which is considered as a very important book, and it is very important even for architects, though it is actually written from a software point of view. But they were talking about he was talking about a different way by which uh, professionals can contribute to the world. So he was pointing out that there are two kinds of institutions. One is the cathedral, and the other one is the bazaar. Okay. And that's why the book is called The Cathedral and the Bazaar. So what he says is that in a cathedral, you have a very strong hierarchy. Somebody is at the top, and people sitting inside this have to agree to whatever the top guys say. And then as you can see, it is like a pyramidal structure inside the cathedral. Everybody has to talk in very hushed tones and not talk very loudly and all that. Whereas a bazaar is like a network of people. People can come and go anywhere. I mean, we don't have to. This is a typical bazaar. I think this is probably somewhere from Iran or something. I don't know where it is from. But in India also, we have scenes like this where you have a higgledy-piggledy collection of shopkeepers and people sitting down and contributing value quite openly. So if you go to this shop and say that you have something, and she may actually not have, I don't know if it's a man or a woman, this guy may not have that thing, but he'll say, yes, I have it. And what he does is that he silently goes to another shop, makes a deal with that person, comes back with that with whatever you want to buy, and you actually buy it from here, not from here. I mean, we all done that. I don't think we need to explain that. So what Eric Raymond was saying is that why is it that the world is not wanting to adopt the bazaar model? Why are we talking about the cathedral model where somebody is owning that entire idea about what that design is, or whatever you're working on, and then that is hierarchically floated down the rest of the system? Why can't we go into the bazaar model where we, and this book became quite a huge book because people thought that you know what, if you try to do the way Linux is doing, it is free and all that, you can't make money, right? I mean, that's the impression people have. But then when he compared it with the bazaar, then people started realizing that, even in bazaar, people make a lot of money. It's not that people don't make money in bazaar, and you can make money only in a cathedral. So that started, people started looking at it. So this book was written in 1999 at the turn of the century. And after that, there is a huge lot of development which has happened about the what is now known as the open source movement in software designing. Now, what is open source movement in software is when a software is getting designed, what you do is that you actually open out that software in front of the world. You tell people that, you know what, I'm developing this software. Do you want to see how I'm developing it, how I'm designing it? Here it is. This is the way you go about. I am going about designing. Now you have to comment on it. You want to think of, tell me what I'm doing wrong. Be my guest. Come and tell me. You want to develop it further yourself? Go ahead. You take this particular code, and then you also start developing. So this it created some kind of impression that, if I do this, because earlier um people were saying that, okay, I'm a designer, I'll hold things to my heart, close to my chest, and I will not show it to anybody else. Okay, and that is how I will make my money. Now, this is unfortunately, in a sense, it is actually encouraged this kind of thinking. For example, a lot of projects assessment in colleges are done on an individual basis. That, okay, here is a design exercise. We give it to the class of 80, and each person in the class comes out with his or her alternative, and the 6 to 8 professors who are there, they will move around and they'll assess each one individually. So this individual way of looking at a software design, sorry, architectural design, even software design used to be like that, by the way, was actually part and parcel of our way we teach in colleges. And if you are actually in any college and if you're teaching there, and if you are silently encouraging that individual sense of, that, okay, I'm a designer and I'm going to come up with this design alternative, uh, you are actually trying to promote people to go into cathedrals. Okay, and designers today, technically their organization structure is like a cathedral. It's like a pyramidal structure with somebody at the top, and then there are senior associates and junior architects or designers and so on and so forth, and the main person on top is the one who's taking the design decisions. So when Eric Raymond and others spoke about the open source movement, and the open source movement, by the way, has caught on quite a lot. Today, very high quality software are written in the open source system. And people think that how can you make money, like, or how, like, for example, that's a myth number 3 here. Okay, so I'll give you this link. There are many such links, actually. You can take a look at various other sites also which talks about this. And there are many, you get a feeling that, okay, if I show the way that my design is evolving and I allow others to participate in that, my god, like, my secret sauce will go off, like, and how will I make my money? What if that guy will go and give that project to somebody else, and next project will go to somebody else? The same issue is there in software also. Software people are saying that who did not like the open source movement, they were trying to promote this way of misunderstanding. So, like, for example, people say that open source is less secure. In fact, open source is more secure than other software. So in this talk, I'll actually vacillate between software and architecture, because the core concepts which I'm talking about, they are applicable both to software as well as to architecture. I'm not trying to teach you programming or anything like that. I'm trying to teach you how you can actually start using these concepts, and then start asking yourself, what type of organization structure would you want, and what kind of money can you make in this? And it turns out that people can make a lot of money. Like, for example, now Microsoft themselves, after that stance in 1998, where they were actually fighting against the open source movement, now they have shifted. They have realized that actually there's a lot more money in open source. For example, if you take today the Android phone, okay, now the Android phone, the core operating system which is there is open source, and it is totally free. That means if you are a smart software developer, you can say that, okay, I don't like what is there inside this particular phone. I will download the particular open source thing, change it based on whatever I need, and then I will install it here. And actually people do that. There are people who can do it. It is actually not so complex as you think. It is probably very intricate, and people mistake between complexity and intricacy. They are not the same thing. Intricacy means you have to just walk through all the various steps which you need to do, and it is definitely not same thing as complexity. So coming back to this, so today, if you look at it in the open source world, if you were to look at how software gets developed, the kind of quality software which is coming out, for example, for architects themselves, there is a software called Blender. Okay, and you can take a look at this particular software. It is totally free, and it is probably today the one of the most powerful rendering systems. In fact, there are very few rendering system which is as powerful as Blender. In the latest version, you even have practically real-time rendering. That means when you ask that particular software to render, it will render it practically immediately. Of course, you need really good hardware for that to happen. But the fact that you can actually do that, that means here is an architect designing some building, and then you give it to Blender, and practically immediately you're seeing it in 3D. and you can see it in with all the lighting and everything, with no other no additional time as such. So it's like real time rendering which is happening. Now this is first seen in Blender, whereas here I've seen architects go and pirate Lumion and some other software, and then they think that Maya, for example, and they think that that's a way to go. Similarly, in drafting, there is a software called FreeCAD. Okay, so many such things are there. My own software is not yet open source, but that will also become open source. So the question here is, there are two questions here. One question would be that if all the software is free, how do they make money? Like, I mean, how does anybody make money? The second point is that now I'm telling that architects and designers to take this thing which has happened in computer software, and there are designers there, and they are designing things openly, and I'm telling all designers that take that concept of working and then do your design openly. And then you wonder, like, how will I now make money? As it is, I'm not making money. As it is, people are not giving me my work, my money for the work which I do. And now this guy is telling that, okay, open up your designing process and let anybody see whatever which is going on, and let that how will now that get made money? How will I have an advantage over this? So I want to show you some of the reasons why this is very critical and very important. And I've been working on this area of how do we talk about architectural designing from the ground up, and how do we put it in a manner by which you can actually start criticizing what architecture is. Okay, so the reason for this particular way of looking at it, let me put it on this whiteboard. Let me draw one circle here. Okay, now let's say that this circle is the circle which represents the entire world. And earlier what used to happen is that there used to be some clumps of people at one part of the world, and there will be another clump of people in another part of the world. As you can see, the dots are there. Now this clump and this clump is not really interacting as such with each other. So we do our little design and our house and whatever here in say Bombay, and somebody here sitting in Holland they are sitting down and doing some design there, and there's no real connection as such which is there. But this situation has changed a lot. Like, there is information which is going on, which is exchanged between all these people here, and these individual clumps of people which used to be there, now it is no longer like that. So now if you make one little mistake here, say this is Brazil, and then you made a mistake in the way the trees were cut over there, that's going to have repercussion here in this particular clump here. And this can't be avoided. You can't sit down and say, no, 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 I don't want to sit down and consider all that. Why should I consider that? But whether you like it or not, your work will get affected by all that. So now this is a serious concern. How do you go around doing this? The number of things which you have to hold in your mind is so large that it is not possible for you to really sit and say that I'm a designer. I'll come up with a design and then I'll give my design to the world outside. And to support that, you have a feeling that because I do this particular design and I give it to my client, I have control over the way that client gives me money. But what they have found is that it's the other way around. If you actually open up your designing process, and then you will sit down and invite everybody to design, one is that you are now expanding the scope of the number of people who can participate in the design, and the things which you are not very knowledgeable about, somebody else in that team who's getting formed to work on the design, that person would sit down and correct that. So what you will actually come up with a much more refined product. And that's the reason why today the open source movement has created open source software which are way ahead of commercial software. Like Blender, which I showed you, is an open source system. Now the question of money, how do you make money by this? If I sit down and do everything free and I'm like a social worker, and the thing is, you have to understand two different things. The fact that you can improve on something, that is the part which is free. The You can still say that I want to charge for this because I've set up this system for you to get a good design. There is nobody who will stop you from saying that. In fact, there are a fair amount of open source software which have got two versions. One is known as a community version where people don't pay, but there is something known as the commercial version of the same thing where people will say, okay, I will use the commercial part of it, though actually practically both are the same. Why they say that is because that organization gets money, and the open source people are developing the open source part of it, make sure that the commercial one is also really highly well polished, and that is beneficial to the client. The client says, mera kya jata hai? Like, if I get a really excellent product, I'll pay for it. And this has happened time and time again to such an extent. Do you know the amount of software developers which are moving on to the open source movement? It is mind boggling. There is this website called GitHub. Okay, you can go to this website, and if you go, let me just go to the main page of this site. It is free to join, and I think there must be, actually I've already logged in here, so I'm not, I think I'm seeing only the things which I am interested in. But if you were to log in without a let me see if I can log in without without logging in, if you see, you will find that the number of people who are there in this, the number of software which is getting developed on this system is huge. There it is, 50 million developers. That's the size of people who are using this particular system. 50 million people are doing that. 100 million repository. One repository is like roughly like a folder, you can say, okay, where you put all your stuff. 100 million repositories. So the amount of people who are working with this system to develop software to help the world is like unbelievable. And this is not yet happened in the architectural industry, and very soon I'll be coming up with a equivalent thing for architects, where a similar kind of thing would now be available for architects. Another thing is, there are 2.9 million businesses who are using this. 2.9 million. Okay, it is not thousands, it is millions. 2.9 millions. Not just that, the peculiar irony of this particular system is that GitHub was earlier with some other organization, and recently GitHub was purchased by Microsoft, only the same Microsoft who had that Halloween documents. They bought it for, I think, some $3 billion. This whole system of encouraging others to come up with open source software has been purchased by Microsoft, and Microsoft is now running this. And imagine this, Microsoft used to be fighting against open source movement, and now they are saying that, you know what, there is actually a lot of money also when you were to sit down and uh, uh, encourage people to come up with this kind of open source software. This reminds me of one old, I think, Panchatantra tale or something, or maybe a Birbal tale, I forget where. I think it is somewhere from Telangana. Like, there was this wise man in Andhra Pradesh, and he was asked by the king. Uh, in fact, somebody said that, you know, you try to give him a very complex answer and whatever, and he will not be able to. Uh, some stories there behind that. So what this wise man told the king is that, okay, give me just 1 grain of rice for 1 day, in for the first day. Next day you double it. Okay. And the third day, you double what was there earlier. So the king thought, this is what, like, I mean, this is so easy to do. Like, I mean, you will hardly get any money. The king wanted to give some award to that man. And turned out that when you actually do this exercise, turns out that there's a multiplier effect, right? And the amount of grain which that king had to give to that wise man was really very large. So on a similar line, when there is a lot of people working together on designing, what happens is that you get a ripple effect and you get a multiplier effect, and a lot of people make a lot of money. One of the questions which people asked here was that architecture is such a tough subject, and architecture is something which the employers are exploiting the freshers and the employees and the interns they're exploiting. That I know, I've seen that happening right in front of my eyes. I had given some consultancy to an horrible organization, I'm sorry to say, let me not name them. And people are exploiting youngsters left, right, center, and the youngsters have got no way to respond to that. Now what should you do? Like, what is a way by which you would get your act together and get your money also and your satisfaction also? So that was let me show you one example of that. I'm involved with this project called can board. Okay, now this can board is a system, a software system which somebody has made, which is for solving some problem. And this is the page where that particular design project, think of this as a design. Okay, don't think of it as a software people are also designing the software. They also have to iterate and think through what they have to design. And so the people who are involved in this, now there are 304 contributors here. Okay, there are 304 people have contributed to this particular can board project, and this is an open source project, so you can download it and use it, and nobody is going to say that you have done anything wrong. They can use it freely. Imagine this, 304 people are working together. If you were to start an office and you wanted to get 304, I mean, it is practically impossible for anybody to come with 304 employees to come together and work. And here these people are working free. Why are they doing it free? How is it that they are doing it free? How do they make money? How do I make money? How will I be able to make money from this? So what happened here is that when the guy who started it, one of these guys would be the guy, this guy, Frederick Guillot. He's not even put his profile image. He's a guy I know because his name is there in his so he's the first guy who started this. Okay, Frederick Guillot. Okay, this chap identified a design problem and started working on it. And then he told people that, see, look here, this is what I'm working on. Do you want to contribute to this problem? And sure enough, in the world, lots of people are there in the world. And a few people said that, okay, I will. And that few turns out to be 304. Okay. Now, when he puts up this particular design, think of that design being put up as an architect putting up that design for, say, some housing colony or something like that. Okay. And behind this, there may be some commercial people also wanting to give money to this guy. Okay, now that commercial person who's giving money to this Frederick, they are interested in getting their job done. Okay, how you do it is your lookout. Okay, so this guy said that, okay, I'll open source it. And then he's got 304 people to work on it together. Okay, and when they work on it, they go through a pretty organized system. I will not say a systematic system. It's pretty loose. It's very flexible. It doesn't say that, no, you have to walk on a rigid line of designing or anything like that. Instead, what people do is that all these 304 people, and I'm also in one of them, and we read all this stuff, whatever it is there, try it out, see where it is going wrong, and then we put up what is known as an issue list. Okay, and in this, that's what GitHub does. This is like a platform which allows you to put up all these things and make people work together cooperatively. Think of this as an architectural project. Think of you as a youngster who's got a project which has to be done, 300 apartment project first time through some contact or something like that, and you don't have that much experience. So if you did it from an open source method using a format of this nature, you can get a lot of people working on it, because somebody will have some half an hour, 2 hours, or 1 hour, whatever, or 2 days in a week to work with you on this. And you can actually sit and think about how your design can work out to be better. People will put up, like they say here, somebody has put up a broken link in user invitation mail. So you click on that, you read that, and then is who it has been assigned to, who has to solve it, what is the milestone you're trying to reach, what is the type of effect which is there, what did you notice, how, what happened here. On a similar line, say you don't have, you're a youngster, you just happen to get some contacts who gave you that large project, and now you want to sit and what do you say, do a damn good job of it, but you don't know something about climate. So somebody says that, okay, if I use this particular design the way it is, it may have some climatic problem, and say, oh, I didn't realize that, because I'm just a fresh architect, I don't know what the thing is. So somebody actually points it out and somebody else solves it, and this whole system is organized in such a manner that nobody kind of holds your throat or anything like that, but you can actually sit and solve some of these problems. Then when you solve it, this is known as a pull request. So somebody will say that, if you do this particular thing, then that particular problem will go away. So this is known as pull request. Okay, so he's suggesting that why don't you pull this particular aspect into your design? So you're working on this housing colony and you got stuck in some detailing of some doors, and somebody in your audience will sit down and say that, you know what, if you do this, then that door problem which you're having, that will go away, or your climate problem will go away, or your the way the chajja has to be placed, that will go away. And these are known as various pull requests, and the main guys will comment on it and say, okay, I think I may not use this, or I will use it, and there's a discussion about that. And then they will say, okay, fine, I'll do that, I'll put it. And then finally, when the change has been accepted, it gives a message that, okay, all checks have been passed, and this has got now incorporated into the ongoing design. So this is how this particular project is going on. What happens to these 304 guys? What happens to these? They're all doing this free of cost. What happens is that each of these guys, they get their own reputation as a software developer. Like here, if you can see, this guy's name is Blue Tech. I mean, that's his nickname. He's from Germany, Hamburg. And if I click on that guy's name, you will go to his page, and where all he has contributed. So people are noticing all this, right? There are millions of people noticing all this, and he may get a project from somebody else. He wins his reputation, he gets a project from somebody else, and then he starts delivering on his own project. He may be doing 4 or 5 things free of cost, but he may still be doing a lot of other things which are not free, which needs to be paid for. So that is one way by which you earn money. Or this Frederick Guillot, who's actually probably is getting commissioned by somebody to do all this, he may say that, okay, I'll distribute my earnings amongst whoever who comes and goes. I mean, there are a 1,000 different ways by which you can actually earn really good amount of money by contributing your intelligence into this such a system. So this I've used this system for making a product called Team Twine. So this particular part of Team Twine is actually the same Kanban system, which this Kanboard system, which this guy is talking about. So from here, I picked up that Kanboard system, and then I incorporated it into my own software, which I am now, I am, I'm trying to sell it to others and make some money out of that. So this is equivalent to this would be like, say, suppose you have designed a housing complex, and now you have contributed to that designer. Your name is acknowledged here. All these people who contribute, they have the legal right to own that part of whatever that contribution. Nobody, it's not saying that, you do the work, but we will not tell who did the work. Nothing like that. You have all the rights to actually say that I contributed to this particular thing. So say, suppose you worked on that 300-acre project for somebody else, it's an open source system, and then you did that door window detailing, Okay, you can take that door window detailing and you use it yourself somewhere else, and then you can make a money there also. So you now have the chance to really sit and have multiple streams of revenue, like that Telangana example of that wise man. You may be getting one grain from here and there, but that grain starts multiplying a lot, and then you'll get a huge amount of money because of the way you are contributing. So all these people eventually do get paid. They may not get paid directly from here, but they get paid by the end effects with this system generates, and that's the reason why it has become so popular. I mean, look at this 100 million people using this. I mean, that's a quite a large amount of people. So even if you say that, numbers don't, so you can twist statistics around to say anything, but this is too large a number. So obviously there is something right which is going on there. Now Microsoft has taken over the system itself. And by the way, you are not paying anything to Microsoft. Okay, Microsoft is running the show, that's all. It's running this website. It doesn't mean that you're actually paying Microsoft. How does Microsoft earn money from this? That's a more refined way of looking at it. Certain parts of it, you want to do some more complicated private projects of yours, I think they will charge some money for that. So that is the way these people are making money. Like what I was telling in the beginning when I was answering some question about the reputation of a college. uh, the reputation, respect, love, friendship, these are all byproducts of some very honest value you deposit into the world. And if you're a teacher, you should actually encourage your students to think from that angle, not to think from the angle of these things being the main product, but they are byproducts. The main product is always high quality value. And when you put high quality value in something, what you get out of that is a very, very nice way of earning money from multiple different places. So this is something which right now, when you see here, you don't see anything graphical here because it's actually to do with computer coding, and their design means writing certain amount of code in that particular software. In case of architects, when we sit down and design, instead of seeing this, you will actually see the actual design over there, and you'll see the 3D model over there or the 2D drawings over there. Okay, drawings are anyway on the way out, but still you will see the actual design emerging over there, and you can peer into the ongoing design. And at some point when it gets finalized is when it becomes construction drawings and you actually make the building over there. So if you were to look at this situation here, that this is the world, and now the world is full of dots everywhere, and there is no, I mean, it's one mess now. Like everything is interconnected with everything, right? In such a situation, you are running your own little architectural firm somewhere, and if you thought that everything about that architecture thing can be done by me and only by me, well, that type of thinking needs to go, because it's no longer in one person's hand. That I can't claim that just because I happen to get a project, I know everything about how that particular project needs to be done. That is no longer the situation. That's not what the world is there for. I mean, and the real money is when you open your hands out and then you get people to see how you're progressing. So you can be damn sure that when that design is actually getting constructed, you knew that enough eyes have poured over that particular design, and all those people actually made good amount of money also, and made a lot of sense for whatever which is there, because it's not just a one time thing. Remember this, when these people are working here, it is doesn't mean that this guy did this and that's the only thing he does in his life. No, in fact, because there are 304 people working on it, the amount of actual work in each of these projects would be very less, because you are handling only the part which you are really good at, and therefore it releases a lot of time for so many other things which you can do. And so you are improving all the time, and you're cooperating with each other all the time, and therefore you can actually make serious amount of money, because you are actually a lot more efficient in delivering whatever you are working on. Okay, so this is the sum and substance of what collaboration and cooperation between various people, how that is changing the landscape of software, and why we should actually sit and take uh, uh, together. So Harimohan said something. Here is one way a college can function: the student, teacher, alumnus together on design solution. Yeah, actually, like there's some colleges, they have what is called a vertical studio, which is a damn good concept. Why should we assume that a guy who just came in fresh into a college does not have anything to say to a final year? Why not? For all you know, that freshness may come up with some new ideas. So the the method of saying that, okay, here is a design project, and we give that design project only to one guy, and each guy works out with, I'm not going to show this to anybody else, I will work out my design on my own. I mean, this is some 200 years back. It should have gone off, actually. It's just because people thought that administrating things together may create a problem, was a wrong notion. It doesn't create a problem as long as the intricacies have been worked out, like the way these people are working out. You are actually coming up with really good solutions, and you are giving meaningful work. Imagine you're working for some ego-filled architect who thinks that he's the biggest guy, and he says that I am saying, no, this is how the design needs to be done, and you are a junior architect there and say, oh my god, like, now what can I say? I can't even open my mouth here because this guy, he thinks that no end of himself, and he wants me to design the way he says. But look at that frustration. I mean, imagine you may be earning some money here and there, but not only is the office producing bad work, but you are spending your time doing very stupid menial work which doesn't really make any sense in terms of your design quality. But on the other hand, if you were collaborating together with many people and then developing the design, okay, then you have a huge amount of reputation which are properly won, because it is all done openly, right? It is not privately done sitting in an office. Ye mera secret hai, ye maine kiya tha. How it was done, you don't have to see, but this is the final product. And finally, when that particular building is made, then you say that it may have looked nice, but it is such a horrible design. I've actually seen, there is I don't want to spell out names, but we have all seen such things. You see a building which won an award and whatnot, and then you go to that site to see, okay, let me see what is this particular thing which won an award. And I go there and I say, my god, this building, this is the one which won the award. I mean, this is crazy. Nobody seems to like it. It is overgrown. There's no this thing, and there are cracks over there. I mean, cracks maybe because of construction flaws, but still, I mean, then you start wondering, is the award system really correct? But imagine a situation where, as the design is getting fleshed out, people have been able to see what you have done, and your wisdom and your intelligence and your design interest actually surfaces there. That is something which people cannot deny. You cannot say that, no, 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 I saw only the final building, okay, and I assessed the architect there. Instead, all the youngsters listening to this, you must understand it is your future. People like me are old, we are dead and gone. Like, but when you are coming up with your design, and if you have a chance to really sit down and win your reputation, okay, and you do it in this such a manner, you are going to gain a huge amount of respectability which will span time, because it is not based on, I knew some contact who published my name in some book somewhere and in some magazine somewhere, and therefore I became famous there. That type of way of working is all gone now. Okay, you cannot bribe your way by bribing some reporters to mention whatever you have done. All this has started happening in one important part of the design field. If I say software design is also part of the overall landscape of design, okay, you are now having a system which will really sit and make a lot of sense for you. There is another side to this story, and which is a side which I want to again tell the youngsters, that every design which an architect does is automatically copyrighted to that particular architect. This is the law, not only in India, all over the world, because the moment you work out anything, any design originally, that data belongs to you. You are the owner of that data. So at this point, I want to introduce one more thing, which is a crossover between architecture and software. Now, a lot of architects don't realize that they are sitting on very high quality, valuable data. Okay, let me give you an example using Google Maps. Now, look what happened with Google Maps. Google went and purchased or created or whatever, okay, they legally own the maps which they have on Google Maps. So if you go to Google Maps, all this data which you see here, they have the rights to that particular data. So you can zoom in anywhere, and you may wonder like how come they got this particular part of wherever this is which part did I zoom into? Some place called Barshi. I don't know where that is, somewhere in India somewhere. Okay. Or Latur. Let's say like, how did they get the ownership of this data? What has happened is that they systematically went around buying and creating these maps. In fact, I know one friend of mine long time back in the 80s, he had set up a workshop where Google had hired his workshop to do some part of this map drafting, where all these somebody has to finally draw all these things, right? So this was actually done. So Google was rich enough to give a lot of such contracts, and they finally made these maps. And once this data is available with Google, what they do is that they sell this data, or rather lease the data to other software developers, for those software developers to make money for themselves and also for Google. So the people think that Google makes money only with Google search. That is not true. They make a lot of money with Google Maps, where these maps, so suppose somebody is wanting to write one application for taxi share in Latur, they may have no choice but to use these maps, because that's how that particular software is written. There is a famous website called housing.com, which did the same thing. So you can actually now, usually where now they've changed. Earlier it was not like this. Earlier, housing.com, the first thing you see is actually the map of the place, and you can really, like, if I search for say a railway station, Nerul or something like that, I think it should show a map here. Okay. Oh, they've changed it actually. This is now a bad interface. Otherwise, earlier, what was happening with housing.com is that you will actually see the map, and then you can go and say that, what if I try to get a house here? How far is the railway station? How far is the other schools? How far is the temple? Now I can see a temple here. Okay. So you're the potential purchaser of a property using housing.com, at one glance through the map can get to know what are the nearby facilities. So what is happening is that Google owns that particular map data, and the application developer paid Google for that map, right? Now look at the opportunity which I'm opening up for architects and designers, especially for people who think that our field is very, very, stuck up, and there's a lot of exploitation. Look at the richness of the situation. Each architect is in a position to work out some map or the other, which are called indoor maps, the maps of the house and the buildings which they have. Who owns that? That architect owns it. Okay. Now comes the new world which is coming in. You must have seen advertisements of Amazon Echo and Google, whatever Google, I don't know what their solution is called, but Amazon Echo is like, you can speak to the device and it'll keep telling you something or the other. Now these are all things which happens inside room, or you can see people are coming up with lights which can be controlled through an app on your phone, or you have security guard being informed via your app. Imagine the richness of the situation which is happening here. You architects are created your design. Now you can utilize the design and say that I'm going to give lease out the data of this design to software developers who will make IoT application. IoT stands for Internet of Things application, for say home automation, or say housing society automation, or to manage the gate outside the society, where people are entering the society, to figure out how parking is allotted inside the society, or the maintenance of that society. I mean, there are a million things which are based around premises. Like your design a office building, the way the office works inside, that is all can be controlled by your floor plan, right? I mean, that is how architects design a building, right? Now, instead of thinking that, you know what, I'm an architect, how do I write software and all? Maybe you can't write the software, but you can give out the data, right? You give out the data to people, other software developers, who will write that software for doing some specialized activity. Say you designed a hospital. Okay. Now, instead of getting involved in the software of how the hospital has to be managed, that will be done by a software guy. They also make money. They also add value. So you will find that after a few years, that as an architect, you are the boss of the data which you have created for your designs, and that is an extremely valuable thing for you. And that's a kind of area which the world needs to go to, because that's the only way by which you can actually sit down and cooperate and improve the world which is there. Okay, so now, like, this is one thing. In fact, here also it has got something like a floor plan by which people can sit, and this is for remote workings. And though this doesn't look like an architectural plan, if you see the screen, it is not an architectural plan as such, but it actually integrates the way people can move around. Now I've logged in as admin, so I can take my avatar and move that avatar around to various places and do certain activities in that particular office. And what did I do? I actually use this particular Kanban system, which is from this guy here, this Kanban system. That is how my that particular utility is working. So look at the combination here. So here is an architect thinking of a problem which people are facing, especially in the COVID times. Everybody is now got dispersed. We are all in different location, and still the company has to be together. And here is a method by which you can do that, and you can actually put all the data together in one place and then work on it. Let me just I have another 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes or so, where I will explain what is the irony of it all. The irony of it all is that when you looked at it, you may think, my God, these software guys are so well organized. I wish the architects were not like this and all. But do you know the irony? The irony is that the software guys actually learned the theory from us architects. And that is the irony, because the core way by which the software designers walk through their design was actually explained in a book which I always speak about, and I don't know why people don't really refer to that book. It's a very nice book. It's called Design Inquiry by Design. It's by an author by the name of John Zeisel. Okay. Now, he wrote this book long time back, and he was not looking at it as software. He was looking at it as a designer. And he was saying that if we have to really sit down and work through a design, so he was saying that you need to inquire as you design. That is the basic theme of that book. As you design, you have to inquire into the various aspects of that design. And this book was written somewhere in the 70s, because I got this book when I was in IIT. So that was somewhere in 1980 or 82. So obviously the book was written before that. It was somewhere in the 70s he had written this book. And it is a purely architectural book, where he talks about how an how architects can evolve a design by continuously inquiring into it. Okay. And so what I'll do is I'll just describe what his basic concepts, what he said. What he said is that all design go through what is known as a spiral process. And coincidentally, if you ask any software guys, if you know any software guy, they'll also use the word spiral, because it actually, intelligent people like John Zeisel had explained that when a design is going on in somebody's mind, whether it is architectural design or whatever design, you're actually spiraling across and refining your design as you go through that spiral process. So what Zeisel said is that for a good design to emerge, you need to spiral and then reach the design. It's not one straight line. You know, one of the mistakes which a lot of teachers do while designing, working on asking the students to work out on design, is to assume that the design goes one after the other in various stages. That's not true. Actually, if the same teacher who's teaching in the college, when she gets in her own office, suppose it's a visiting prof and she's doing her own design, and if you honestly ask her, do you proceed in a straight line in your design, and she will actually sheepishly say, no, I don't actually proceed. You go ahead a little bit in the design, and then you turn back, and then you go again in the head, and then you turn back, because you're continuously revising and iterating and going around in seemingly in circles, but actually they are spirals till you reach the final design. So what happens? What the irony is that all this fundas, which was actually architects, theoreticians fundas, were taken by the software industry. They implemented it really well using GitHub and all that. So they use what is known as they call it the agile process also, and there's another one thing called Scrum. All these things are various jargon which is layered on top of whatever John Zeisel had explained. So John Zeisel actually talks about how something can evolve. And the funny thing is that these guys, the software guys, they implemented it. We are still stuck 200, 300 years back and not really getting into understanding all these things. The real money the software guys are making, they are handling data. We are saying, my God, how will we make money when we are sitting on really valuable data which we have generated of our own, which the government has given you legal rights to use? If today, when I show my architectural floor plans of my projects, none of my clients can come to me and say, no, 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 that is my project, you cannot show it. No, I am the owner of the design. I am the guy who's got that particular right to talk about that design, not even the guy who is commissioned that building. And that's not just in India, all over the world, it's like that. You are the author of that creative work. Now, all this system was taken up from people like John Zeisel and other sources, and where architects had played, theoreticians had played a big role in getting that done. And we are sitting down and not even aware that, this is how the software industry is actually making a good amount of money. Okay, so I'll briefly explain one of the cycles which Zeisel explained in that. So in one cycle, you will notice that there are actually three different parts in one cycle. Think of one cycle as having three different parts. Okay, so I'll just resize it so that it looks more or less the same. There is no size difference actually. So these three parts, so this goes from here to here, and then from here to here it goes, and then this part becomes one cycle, and then the second cycle starts again. That second cycle will also have three parts, but let me not go there now. Okay, now what happens is, oops, how do I erase this? Okay, I think I'll erase it like this. Okay, so you have these three parts in one cycle. What are these three parts? They are called, you can name it as 3Cs. Okay, so all of them are start with C. So first part of that design cycle is called conceptualize. Okay. Now, concept is a very, very badly defined term in architectural circle. But if you ask the software guys, they know pretty well what you mean by this particular term. I'll come to that. I'll show you how that is done. And this is called create, where you actually work out the design in front of you and then do something with whatever you had conceptualized. And this last one, I would call it as, how do I change this? I'll call that as, criticize. So each of the spiral has got three parts. One is called conceptualize, create something, and criticize. So if you go back to this particular system, how do people conceptualize is that they will actually write something. See, this is where they will conceptualize. They'll say, now here the software has already reached a particular stage. If you see some early projects, you will see what is known as called an SRS, software requirement specification. Okay, where that guy who's designing the software will flesh out the concepts on which that software will solve the problem which it is supposed to solve. So that's called the SRS requirement. And that software, then this is a create part where people will actually write some stuff inside this. Like for example, in this, sorry, in if you go into one of these folders, you will find that there is some code. So this is the actual drafting which got done in software. So this guy has drafted out that part of that particular software. I'm telling you in terms of equivalent terms. So equivalently, an architect would be drafting out the design and then saying that this is how you would work out that design. And let me go back to the diagram. So the designer conceptualizes it, makes a document saying that this is the way I would go proceed in solving this particular problem. In the initial cycles, it will be mainly about the problem. As you go later, it will be more about the solution. So because you have to shift your focus from the problem and finally arrive at a solution. So the whole idea of spiraling is not to wallow around only in the problem, but actually eventually reach the solution. Then you go to the create stage where you actually flesh out some kind of sketch or 3D model or whatever. And the last part is very important, which is the criticism. And that is where this, you'll see a huge section devoted only to the criticism part, which is called these issues. So now this particular software being designed has got 100 open issues and probably a lot of closed ones also. So if I say close, so 3,222 closed issues. That means people said that this is wrong, that is wrong, this is not right, that is not right. And then all the people, all the 300 people working on it, they went around solving all that and they criticized it and they found the solution. And then they iterated, went around spiraling through the design process and eventually got the design to this stage. Even today, finally, there are 100 further questions which needs to be solved, and designing technically never really stops. If I were to summarize, what I'm trying to point out here is, for this particular section of the CoDe webinars was about what is the future which is coming into architecture, how do architects design, and how can we use the concepts learned in the open source movement, and how we can use those concepts to our benefit for our future. Because today, to assume that I, as an architect, I know everything about the design, that's a very, very dangerous statement to make, because the world has become really complicated. And there's a lot of advantage by opening out your hands, taking all these fundas which started with architects themselves. There's another architect, Christopher Alexander. He wrote this trilogy called The Pattern Language, The Oregon Experiment, and A Timeless Way of Building. 3 big fat books he had written. Coincidentally, that architect's master thesis, Master of Architecture's thesis, was designing a Harijan village in Gujarat. He's an American. And this architect, Christopher Alexander, went and wrote those 3 books. And those 3 books became very important books in the 70s. I think Harimohan and all, we all know those that particular author. You know what has happened? The software guys took those books, used the concepts from that, and today Christopher Alexander in University of California, Berkeley, is no longer in the architecture department. He's moved over to the computer science department. So the funny thing is that all this knowledge is not coming to the general public or to even architects. Architects are still in a blinkered lot saying that, you know what, we have to design like this. Somebody will give us a project. I'll work on the project and then I will make the thing and I'll make some money and I'll make some sense. But you are no longer making sense, according to me. Most architects who are running their offices need to move into this form of working, because that's the only way by which you can actually very credibly win your accolades and make a lot of money. And moreover, you can actually cross over into contributing to the software field, because that crossover also already happened. It has already happened. Now with the COVID crisis, we are in a cusp between real world architecture and virtual architecture. That has already happened. We can't say that this is theoretical anymore. So we have to sit down and redesign our offices and make a lot of money and a lot of sense by this. I'll just end with just very briefly showing you a little bit of what TAD now has. Okay, I can't show you what TAD does completely, but what TAD does is that you can actually, just starting, you can actually apportion your design activity among 75 other people. I mean, it's not okay. This particular design, say this is a apartment building which my office had done, and in TAD now you can actually get many people to work on certain parts of the design, and you say, you right click. Right now it is disabled because you have to do some settings for it, and you can say lock a particular branch of the design, and then give that branch over to one guy, some other branch to somebody else, third branch to third person, and you can actually do pretty large project. Like this is another complex, Devi Dayal complex. There's lots of buildings here. This is something I think Bobby and we had done together. I think, remember? We had done this. That. Yeah. So in this, imagine this is a large housing complex for one mill. Finally, it didn't turn up. We were just doing the initial preliminary exercises, and in this there are some buildings here, and imagine multiple people working together on a particular project and working out a particular design. So this is the way by which the future would come. And when you own the data, you are the one who's owning the data. Remember that. Nobody can steal it from you. So you can then lease out the data just the way Google Maps leases out their data. And then you can have contracts with software developers and they do the software part. What are you concerned about that? And you can then sit and make a lot of money and a lot of sense in all this.
Well, Sabu, that was wonderful.
Thank you.
As usual. And this time we have kept it short and simple. And there are very interesting three points worth taking home. I hope this time we had very few participants, but then all these 3 or 10 or participants can definitely multiply these 3 thoughts and take it over to their backgrounds and their respective places of work.
Nowadays the world is full of webinars only.
Webinars only. So I'm sure these people, all those who have participated this time can take away these very interesting 3 important points that you have pointed out. Now, the first one, as I say, is about what I put in the share the chat box also, is that look at our colleges. We all work in separate silos in separate years, each individual student, individual teachers, and so on. But college is a place where student projects can happen with shared values, shared tools, shared thoughts between students and teachers, not just within a year, but across the years. And I believe that should not stop just in the college. See, an alumnus is an alumnus and he or she is part of the college forever. So once an alumnus passes out from a college, when he or she gets into profession, it is a continuing process of continuing to design with the same set of people and thoughts and tools and values which you have picked up in the college. That is where the standard of a college gets built up over a period of time. You had answered that first question, one of the first queries in the beginning. This is the answer to that the real reputation of a college is actually because of not just the students, but all the alumnus put together and the entire body of work or data created by all of them together, right from first year to final year and thereafter. Not necessarily the kind of data you produce after leaving the college, but throughout the lifetime. There's a life cycle of a student, from a student until he or she becomes a professional. That is the first important point. So this is where I think our colleges should function totally differently from now onwards, especially in these COVID times. If they have learned something, they need to really work in a very collaborative manner with shared values, tools, and thoughts. That's one. Second important thing which Sabu, you pointed out was that, see, in our times, we are old timers. I am also an old timer. We belong to the same generation. And for us, respectability had to be built over a period of time. You know, for me to become a respectable architect, it took me at least about 10 years after passing out for, for me to get noticed by somebody in profession. Ki, okay, this fellow does some work. And even after joining a college for teaching, it took me about 5-6 years to get noticed by others to say, ki, okay, this fellow teaches quite well, you know. But today that is not the situation. You can build respectability from day one, provided we work as participant in the process, not in isolation. Each individual works as a participant, collaborator with a kind of open source system of give and take system of teaching and learning, which is again another aspect of our profession which we still haven't explored. You know, the open source system of education and profession. I don't know where the beginning is. You have given some kind of direction to this particular aspect of building respectability right from day one, the moment you decide to become an architect. The third is a very important aspect which you pointed out is the important aspect of that your design is a treasure trove of data. You have said it very rightly. Most architects do not know it, that every design that you create is full of data, which is very, very useful. Ever since the digital world has come in, it has become more useful for other developers who are actually part of digital enablement of the built environment. All the entire built environment, from the buildings to the streets to the world to the environment, the trees, the landscape, everything is today controlled by digital media, digital systems. So the data which each architect creates is a treasure trove. Now we must learn how to keep this data, manage this data, put up this data for use, and in that process we must learn to make money. I mean, this is one issue which is very, very dear to everybody's heart, every architect's heart, how to make money using all the data that you keep on generating and churning out on a day-to-day basis. So thank you, Sabu. Thank you very much for that wonderful session. I would like to conclude this session with a big thanks to all the participants who have been here.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Bobby and
Yes, thank you,
Srinivas
Bobby.
My pleasure,
Very
sir.
happy
My
to see
pleasure,
you.
of course.
Please take these issues forward and in your own little and big circles, and let us see if things will change.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
At least in the time when we are alive. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank
Sabu,
you.
for being.
Thanks.